So we're going to take some notes on proportional relationships, which we started in class. So proportional relationships and graphs. And let me make it a little bigger. So proportional relationships and graphs, part 2, we can say. And so we already know from class that the graph of a proportional relationship can be found using a table. So to graph a proportional relationship from an equation, use a table. So what that means is, for example, if I had y equals 6x, then the first thing I do is I make an xy table. So I'm gonna do a little more work in my table this time so that you can see it. So I want you to copy it this way. So here I have x, here I have y equals 6x, and then I have y over here. So for my x, if it's a whole number like this, you can sort of pick what you want. I like to do -1, 0, 1, and then another number that's at least a couple away. So let's do 4 this time. So if I know that y equals 6x and my x is -1, then here I do 6 times -1 because I'm basically replacing x with whatever numbers over here. So I'm going to fill in that column first. My next one would be 6 times 0. Then I would have 6 times 1. Then I would have 6 times 4. And then I multiply them to get my y answer. So 6 times -1 is -6. 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 4 is 24. And since I've written it like this, I'm actually going to transfer this into a separate thing to write the XY pairs. But after this, I want you to see how you can get that information straight from the table. So here my XY pair would be -1, -6. Here my XY pair is 0, 0. Here my ordered pair is 1, 6. And here my ordered pair is 4, 24. And so the next thing you want to do is graph this. So in class, we made a graph that you had already numbered. So you can put this line on that same graph. I'm going to take a minute and make one here really quickly. I gave you a whole page to do it though, so maybe I should make it a little zoomed out. Okay, so I'm gonna pretend I have a whole page graph over here. The idea with making it so big is that you can compare different ones. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I noticed some of you, when you are graphing, leave an extra space for the 0. So you want to think like this space here is 1, and then it goes 2, 3, 4, 5. So you want to have as many boxes there as you do numbers. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And putting these lines in helps you sort of see it, but you could also skip those lines and just draw the lines every 5 if that feels like less messy to you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You always want to make sure you are starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, starting at the middle and counting outwards from the middle. So you don't want to just count from the top all the way down. And remember, when you are going to the right, that's positive. And when you're going up, that's positive. And when you are going to the left, that's negative. And when you're going down, that's negative. So There's no way I'm gonna fit 424 on this graph. So we'll talk about what happens in that case. And it's possible you might be able to fit it, but I'm not gonna fit it. But at this point, we use a table. So we find X, Y values. So find X, Y ordered pairs. And then we're going to graph them. So I'm going to start with -1, -6 is down here. Then I have 0, 0. Then I have 1, 6. And then my 424 would be way off my graph. So I'm just going to ignore it for the time being and just draw my line like this. And so what I want you to notice is it's a straight line. So all of your points should be on the same line. And if you are using the graph paper accurately, it will work out. And your line should go all the way to the edges of your graph. So that's a easy-ish example. And then we're going to do 2 examples with fractions, because I think that's where it got a little trickier. So our next example is going to be y equals 3/5 x. And for this example, the first thing we always do is make a table. So I'm going to make my table x. And then, like I said, I'm going to be making it with this middle column to show my work. Y equals 3/5 x. And then y over here. And if I have a fraction, here is what I want you to think about. For x values, I want you to skip count by the denominator. And so technically you can always pick whatever x values you want, but this will make graphing easier and neater. So I want you to get into the habit of when you have a fraction for the x values, since you get to choose, you're going to skip count by the denominator. And remember, we want at least one negative. So let's start with -5, then 0. And then if I keep counting by 5s, I would have 5, 10, 15. Okay. So then the next step is to use my equation to find the y values. So here I have 3/5 times -5. Here I have 3/5 times 0. Here I have 3/5 times 5. Here I have 3/5 times 10. Here I have 3/5 times 15. And the reason I wrote those numbers a little small on top is when I'm multiplying fractions, I'm always going to make that whole number over 1. So here I have 3/5 times -5/1. I multiply straight across. I get 3 times -5 is -15. 5 times 1 is 5. And then to simplify it, I can divide that. So -15 divided by 5 gives me -3. The next one, because of my 0 property, is just 0. So that's pretty easy. The next one, I'm back to multiplying fractions. So I say 3 times 5 is 15 over 5 times 1 is 5. And then I divide. 15 divided by 5 gives me 3. The next one I do 3 times 10 is 30. 5 times 1 is 5. Then I divide. 30 divided by 5 gives me 6. And then the next one is 3 times 15 is 45. 5 times 1 is 5. And then 45 divided by 5 gives me 9. And then from there, that's where I get my ordered pairs. And now you can sort of see that my ordered pair is the XY combination. So I'm going to write these out, but if you see that and you don't want to write them out, that's okay. So -5, -3, then I have 0, 0, then I have 5, 3, then I have 10, 6, and then I have 15, 9. So I'm going to go back to my graph and try to graph these ones. So I have -5, -3, so that goes left 5, down 3. Then I have 0, 0. Then I go right 5, up 3. Then I go right 10, up 6. And then I go right 15, up 9, which is a little hard to count. So 15, 9, there, I think. And then we are going to draw our line. and take it to the edges of our graph. And what I want you to get in the habit of doing is make sure you label your lines. So this one was y equals 6x. This one is y equals 3/5 x. And let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, we have time for one more. So we're going to do one more example. And this time we're going to do a negative fraction. So going to go back over here. So if my fraction were y equals -5 halves x. So again, I'm going to make my 3 columns. X, y equals -5 halves x, y. And I learned from last time that with the fractions, I really need more space. So I'm going to make my table a little bigger this time so I have enough space to write. So sometimes when we're doing work, it helps to like figure out what's going to make it the neatest for us. So remember my hint for fractions, I'm going to skip count by the denominator for my x values. And I'm going to start with a negative. So I'm going to go -2. And I'm giving myself 2 boxes each this time. So -2, then 0, then 2, then 4, and let's do 8. So I like to do one that's a little further away because it helps me see if my line's correct. If you do them all really close together, it's hard to make your line accurate the further it goes out. But at least one of them should be a little bit far away. Now in this middle part, I'm going to do the -5 halves, right? -5 halves times my x value. And remember, you can write it on the top of the fraction because the bottom's going to be 1. Here I have -5 halves times 0. I'm not going to make 0 a fraction because anything multiplied by 0 is just 0. This one, I'm going to say -5 halves times 2. I'm going to make it a fraction, so it's 2/1. Then I have -5 halves times 4/1. And then lastly, I have -5 halves times 8/1. And so sometimes I like to write out this column all the way and then simplify it because then I just have to look through the numbers. So here, if I'm multiplying on top, I have -5 times -2 is 10. On the bottom, I have 2 times 1 is 2. And if I divide 10 by 2 equals 5. Here, this one just equals 0. Here, if I multiply on top, I have -5 times 2 is -10. Then 2 times 1 is 2. Oops. 2 times 1 is 2. And then -10 divided by 2 is -5. So -5. This next one, I have -5 times 4 is -20. 2 times 1 is 2. And -20 divided by 2 is -10. And then this last one here is -5 times 8, which is -40. And then 2 times 1 is 2. So if I divide here, I get -20. And then, so this time I am not actually going to write out the points like this because they are in my table. The x is over here, the y is over here. But if it helps you to write them out, you should, because part of this is about having the information in a way that you can follow it. So I have those points. I'm going to go back to my graph and I have -2, 5. So I'm going to start there. So that means I go 2 to the left, up 5. So that's like here. Then I have 0, 0. You'll notice that all of these graphs have 0, 0. Then I have 2, -5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I have 4, -10. And yeah, it would take a long time to get to the -20, so I'm not going to worry about that one. It's just off my graph. And that's okay sometimes. So I am going to connect these lines. I mean, these points to make a line. And I am going to draw the line like this. And then I'm going to label it. So y equals -2/5 x. Okay, So what we have here is, oh wait, it's not negative 2/5 x. It's negative, I was mixing up my problems. It's negative 5/2 x. Okay, so hopefully you have 3 graphs like that. And then you have the ones that we did from class. If you didn't get a chance to finish the ones from class, I will put up the equations over here, and I would encourage you to try some of them. So there was y equals 4x, y equals negative 4x. There was y equals 1x, y equals negative 1. I was trying to rush. Negative 1x. Then there was y equals 1/4 x, y equals negative 1/4 x. And then I think the last one was y equals 2/5 x, 2/5 x, and y equals negative 2/5 x. And so anytime you are graphing a relationship, right, you start by making a table. So you can make your table just a regular x and y like this and do your work on the side, or you can make the 3-part table if you found the 3-part table to be helpful. Then you pick your x values. If your k here, this number, is a whole number or an integer, I would just use like -1, 0, 1, and then something. If your number before the x, that coefficient, is a fraction, then you are going to skip count by the denominator. And you want at least 4 or 5 numbers. And then you will fill it in based on whatever x values you picked to find the y values. And that gives you ordered pairs. Then you're going to graph those ordered pairs. And you should end up with a line. And so after all of this, what I want you to know is for any proportional relationship, the graph should be a straight line through the origin. And remember, the origin is 0, 0. Okay, so we are going to start combining this graphing idea with the unit rates and other ways of thinking about proportional relationships. But try and make sure you have these notes in your notebook. Make sure your graphs are labeled. And if you want, try some of the ones over here for practice.